Welcome back. Let's talk SASS. But first, we need to get in and set up a few things. We're going to call them variables. If you've ever done any JavaScript or really any other type of programming, you know variables as methods to store data. And variables within SASS are methods to store styles. So let's create, within our helpers directory, a new file and call it variables.scss. I'll also prepend that with a underscore. And the underscore means that our file will not be compiled along with any other things. Our renderer or our preprocessor will never be confused. This says, hey, don't compile me. I'm just used for SASS purposes. So we have our variables file set up. And what do variables do? That's a good question. Let's go over this very quickly. A variable is something like this. Let's say we want a color of primary. So we have a primary color for our brand. So let's make one that says primary and give that, just like you would in CSS, a colon and a semicolon afterwards. Our primary color is going to be green, right? And so into our CSS, let's say that we're creating a navbar. So we have a div with a class of navbar. We have a background on that, and we need a primary color to have as our background. So rather than saying green, which of course would be very simple, but sometimes we do use hex values within our color naming. So in this case, this might be something more like 369421. Now that's easy for us to remember right now because it's right here. However, on into our project, whenever our CSS is hundreds of lines, this would be much harder to remember. So we would use this variable name in place of our background color. So in this case, we can just say @ or $primary. This is our primary color. Let's save that. We didn't get a primary or a compiled success note. Why is that? Well, that's because we haven't yet included our variables.scss within our main library. This is something you might come across yourself. So I'm going to create a little note for myself and say this is for our helpers. And we'll do an @import. I can simply grab this. And I know that that's helpers, and then we have a SCSS file called variables. Let's save that. All right, and once saved, we can see that that has been successfully compiled. But what does that mean in our CSS? If we head into our main.css, we can see that we have an item with a class of navbar, and it has received the variable background of 369421. Our variable worked. That worked out really nicely, but what about when things get a little bit more complex? Let's say we have within our navbar a unordered list. So within our navbar, we have navbar, UL, and then there's some styles within here. But also we might have navbar, UL, and then adding in a line item. That's pretty good there. And then we might again, though, have in a navbar, UL, LIA. Now this can start to be really, really long and drawn out and not manageable within your SCSS or CSS workflow. What happens whenever there turns into hovers and active or other CSS states? Well, this is where nesting comes into play. We simply take our navbar and extend this within this bracket with a UL. That UL can contain an LI, and that LI can contain an A. That A can contain an and this is one of the best techniques, and hover, and a and active, or any other CSS state that you can activate. Let's give these some styles. So we might want to display our unordered list as block. That works. Our line items are all inline block. And our anchors might be all block. On hover, we might want to give a background of red. And then on active, we might want to give a background of white. So let's save this and see what our compiled CSS looks like. If we run to the main CSS, we now see that we have our navbar. But also we have our navbar with an unordered list with our style. We have a navbar with an unordered list and a line item, along with our navbar li or ULLIA and our hover and our active state. This is a lot of CSS to be all in one place. However, within our variables, this is pretty small. And that's why nesting is such a powerful tool to use. Alright, so now that we've talked through some of the basics and you understand how SASS compiles and how it works at a very base level, let's dive into our full project and begin development on just shirts.